Let's begin by introducing JavaScript. What is JavaScript? JavaScript is a language which is used by browsers to make your websites interactable. So your HTML and CSS are basically very static. With JavaScript, you can add some dynamic side to your web page so that you have an interactive website. So JavaScript is a programming language that your browser uses to add these functionality to your web page. How can you execute JavaScript? So there are several ways. You can execute JavaScript on your browser. You can execute your JavaScript standalone, for example. You can use Node.js environment to run scripts. You can run a server on JavaScript, like with Node.js. You can run JavaScript on, I guess, not very effectively, but not sure. You can run JavaScript on IoT devices nowadays. Tinker? I forgot what the actual platform is called, but there is one, and actually there might be several. Maybe that's the most important ones are the browser and Node.js. Node.js can be used for your local tooling for web development, for example, like Webpack, Gulp. Things like these are executed in Node.js on your local machine. They are used in CI/CD environments, and you can run Node.js servers. You can run HTTP servers on Node.js with frameworks like Express, Koa. There are several others. So you can have your server-side application running in JavaScript or running in Node.js using JavaScript. So those are the platforms. Syntax. How does JavaScript look like? For this, I can just create syntax.js. So JavaScript normally looks like this. Like you can have variable initialization. For example, variable fruit equals apple, something like that. So that would, but yeah, there's variable initialization. There are functions, definitions. If you can see function, my func or something like that, which looks almost like on any other programming languages that might be familiar. So hello world, that's a function, right? For example, var you could say okay, for now we're just concatenating two strings. Like this would be concatenation of two strings. You can do my sum. I'm using var just because that was only way to declare variables before we had let and const in ES6. We'll come to that soon. But yeah, this is how JavaScript will look like. You can add comments in double slashes, like this is a return. Comments are those texts that won't be executed. They're just to help developers to understand code. You can also use this one. So that's another multi-line comment, right? You can add js.block stuff as well. Yeah, something like this. Right. This is basically how JavaScript looks like. Next is variables. So as we already touched here, we can instantiate or initialize variables by using var keyword, which used to be the only way to initialize variables. We'll have to talk about data types when we're talking about variables. So these variables can have different data types, like string, for example, here, and my number is going to be 1. That will be an integer, or in JavaScript we have numbers, and numbers include all integer, signed, unsigned, floating numbers, everything, right? And all these data types, as you see, if you're familiar with other programming languages, they will have typings in them, which is called static typing. In JavaScript, the typing is dynamic, so you can just initialize your variables, and the type is implicitly determined. So all these variables, I don't need to say this is a Boolean, this is a string, and this is a number. For that, we have something called TypeScript, which will add that static typing to JavaScript, which will allow you to type your variables and everything. So these are variables. Why do you need a variable? For example, you're doing some mathematical operations, like you have a sum feature, like function that adds two numbers, right? So that's our function, which takes two numbers a and b and adds them. So here we don't need to worry about variables here. This is very simple example, but although there's no explicitly defining of variables, there are still those parameters which holds those data. So for example, we say we are going to have a third variable called c, and let's say c is the sum, and we're returning that c. So the function is still doing the same thing. The difference is we now have this variable called c, which is a sum, we could call it sum, right? So sum is equals a plus b, and return that sum. So we'll require these how to say, pockets, like the values are values, and these variables are those pockets to hold those values. So for unknowns we will use variables, like things that are known but we want to have these like in parameters, things like that. We'll need variables. I think that's it. Well, I said I will talk about let and const as well. So let is a way to define your variable. You can replace all your vars with let. What this does is same thing, but let and const was this new keyword added to ES6. When you use let is when you're using a variable, and when you use const is when you're using a string. We're using a constant value. For example, let's say const pi, right? Const pi is 3.14, we know that, and the value of pi never changes, that's the truth. So if you're initializing the value for pi as a constant, it will protect it from being mutated or changed. So if by mistake in your code somewhere you try to make your pi something else, like pi equals 4, that's going to break, because you're trying to assign a value to a constant, right? So pi's value is not going to change from 3.14 to anything else, but your code is trying to do that, so it will throw an error saying you're trying to change the value of a constant. So that's where you have the two, let and const, to define variables and constants. So yeah, that's all about variables. And now we can go on with operators. As we saw before, in the sum example, we already have used an arithmetic operator. This is something like in algebra. You have different variables like x and y or a and b, and there are some symbols or operators that are doing mathematical operation on them, and they are those operators. So plus does the addition or sum of those left and right side. So here what this does is it adds the value of a and the value of b and returns that sum. There are other operators like function that subtract two numbers, right? This will have, there you go, a minus b, just like in your algebra, right? The difference will be equals the value of a minus the value of b. I'm not showing how this function will be executed right now, because we'll come to that after this. But here we're just talking about those mathematical operators. Also, the sum here, plus, has there's something called overloading of operators, operator overloading. The concept you might know from C, where you can extend the functionality of those operators by overloading them depending on the type of the values that are passed. So for example, my sum does mathematical summation or mathematical addition of those 1 and 2, whereas fruit plus banana, this will concatenate the strings. I think those are, like, this is the very basic and very frequently used operator override. So yeah, there are other operators like division, multiplication. We use this asterisk for multiplication, modulus or modulo, which is used to get the remainder of the division between two numbers. There are others like increment and decrement. When you want to increment a value by 1, they're used in integers and usually very frequently used in loops to increment those numbers, counters, or stuff like that. Yeah, basically those are the most frequently used operations. We already talked about data types, but let's say, what did we miss? So function is one of the types. Function, there are arrays like right? So this is an array. These are all my favorite Pokemons, which is a collection of some values, right? In this case, we have a collection of strings, a collection of Pokemon to be more precise. It can be something like this, like first 5 prime numbers. It's a collection of numbers, collection of prime numbers, right? So that's how you write arrays with that square bracket, and you can have these commas in between the elements, similar to how you write that in English or many other languages. If you're presenting a collection of something, you put commas in between, and that's what's happening. Let's say my favorite so if we have something like this, this is now a list of objects, right? List of objects. Okay, we won't go further. So here, this is a list of objects. So objects is another data type. Object has properties. So if you're familiar with object oriented programming, there are classes, and there are instances of those classes which are called objects, and these are some objects. Objects can be a representation of real world objects, like a Pikachu. A Pokemon is an object, and each Pokemon has their own unique properties, or not, it doesn't have to be unique, but their properties, and those object holds all those properties. If you see here, those Pokemons have their name, types, level, and you name it. They're all the types of also this can just be a number, so object properties might have any type of data within them again, right? So levels are numbers, whereas names are strings. So also we already saw Boolean here. Booleans are this binary data type, 0 or 1, or true or false. So that's another data type. We have string, we have function, we have object, we have arrays. Basically those are, maybe I missed, maybe not, but those are the most important data types. And please subscribe if you haven't. Yeah, thanks for watching.